Hey, welcome back to the Behavioral Insights channel. I'm Dr. Lisa Brothers, and today I'm going to break down the 5 phases of behavior change that have to occur if we're going to take something from basically a desire all the way through to a lifestyle change. So let's dive right in. The first thing that I want to go through with you guys is what happens before we even decide we want to do something and make a commitment. Usually there's something that happens that's kind of serving as a catalyst. So usually that means that we recognize there's a problem, there's something that we want to change or improve, right? But then that's also paired with the belief in an opportunity. There's an opportunity to change, to improve, to grow, to make something happen, to see something through. So we have to see that there's not just a problem there, but there's also an opportunity for us. And we believe that we have some level of ability to basically move through this progression and turn it into a lifestyle change. So we have this problem and this opportunity that happens first here, the catalyst. And then the first phase that brings us into isn't one of taking action yet. It's more so a phase of desire. And what's happening in the desire phase is we're learning, we're figuring out what would a method look like, what can I do? So you're just learning, but you're really not putting things into action yet. And then once we get to that point that we feel like, okay, I have a plan or an idea of where to start. And so you make a commitment. And that's where you start to switch from learning to actually getting into motion. This phase we're going to call the acquisition phase. And this one is where behavior is so fragile in the beginning that we have to be really careful and intentional about what things look like here, or we'll never make it to the point where progress becomes visible. This is where most people fall off. So we start with this catalyst, right? And then we end up making a commitment to change something. And then what's the story? Usually there is some inconsistent follow through. And then what happens? We just end up stopping. We don't see any progress and we're like, this isn't working. It's not the right time. Can't do this right now. And we stop. So then we just wait and wait and wait. And then maybe a new catalyst will come into our life that says, okay, now it's time to commit, time to try and make a change. And then if we repeat this pattern over and over, we start losing faith in our ability to move through this progression to see any real change that's lasting. And we also start to adopt something psychologists called learned helplessness. So we say, okay, this is just how it is for me. I recognize I have this problem here. But now when it comes to that other crucial part of the catalyst, we start to say, but there is no opportunity. The opportunities out there don't work for me. I'm different. I'm stuck with this problem and things aren't going to change. And when that happens, we no longer look for opportunities. So these things never become catalysts and we no longer want to make commitments to change because we don't believe that we'll actually follow through to the end to get to the desired result. So what I'm going to share with you is how we progress through that. How do we get through this acquisition phase so that we actually see some visible progress? Here's what we have to do to make sure we get through that stage where behavior is just so fragile. We have to be very intentional about a few different things here. The first thing is having some form of feedback. We need to be able to have feedback from somebody that knows what they're doing in this area, So we know whether the steps that we're taking are effective, if they're likely to lead us to change over time. The other piece of it is support. So having one or more people, groups, environments, places that are supportive of this change, that normalize this type of change, so that you don't feel like the oddball and you can really relate and other people understand the challenges that you're going through and all of that. It makes all the difference. So you want to build in feedback, support, and there's also a really important component of environmental design. So you have to make sure your environment is set up in a way not only socially, but also physically and internally too, so that you can see this through to get to the point of visible progress. So the thing about visible progress is that's where the efforts that you've put in start to become reinforced. They're strengthened. Tells your brain this is working, keep going, right? Before you get to that point, you're putting in a lot of effort and probably not seeing the level of results that you would like to. And so that's why behavior is so fragile during this phase. And we have to build in all of these other forms of support to keep those behaviors going. We build in our own feedback loops so that we can keep strengthening those behaviors, even though they're not leading to the desired result yet. So essentially what we're doing here in this piece is we're putting together an environment that increases the reward for this behavior before we see results and decreases the effort, the cost, the friction. Once we have that established, we can see through to the next phase where we start to see some visible progress, and that brings us to the third phase, which is maintenance. Once we're in this maintenance phase, you think like, oh, okay, I can just relax, right? Not at all. So once you get to the point where you see a little bit of visible progress, it's going to help build some momentum for you, but you're going to encounter challenges, setbacks. Things aren't always going to go as planned. You're going to probably compare yourself to other people and their rate of progress. You're probably going to end up feeling like, maybe this is taking longer than I expected. Is it worth it? You might see your beliefs start to waver. So this maintenance phase is also a testing phase. It's going to pressure test and make sure you keep these things in place so that you have a feedback system that's strengthening and maintaining that behavior over time. But it's also going to help you build that resilience. Keep reinvesting in the idea that this change is worth it, even though you're going to encounter some hardship along the way and it's not going to be easy. So that's really, this one is all about testing, making sure those supports are built in strong and that they are really durable. So then what you see, if you see that phase through, your progress starts to compound. So when that happens, it really starts to accelerate because you've built a foundation of solid habits and routines that have gotten you to the point where you're not only seeing progress, but it's starting to compound. So that means your habits, your routines are in lock. But the important part here is that it's not just visible to you anymore. It's now probably starting to gain some social recognition. People are starting to notice without you even saying anything that something's different. You've made a change and you're seeing it through. That happens in this fourth phase here. So then if you keep going through that, you end up getting to the desired result. But that's not where the story ends. A lot of times if we're pursuing long-term goals, we want to improve our health, our relationships, we want to maybe make a pivot in our career or pursue a particular career, then when we achieve the desired result, it doesn't stop. We just go into the fifth phase, which I like to call the lifestyle phase. And this is where things are not just... You're not just doing things in order to achieve a certain result or something like that. It's much more in line with your values and the habits and routines that you've built in order to achieve that result, they start to become just part of how you operate. And not only that, but they really are tied to important results or outcomes in your life. So say, for example, with a career, this is now, it becomes your financial security. It becomes the way that you provide for your family. So it's like it becomes linked to so many other things, and that's what maintains the behavior over time. But it's not until after you've achieved that desired result that you get to that place where things are linked to other really important values and priorities, and that's maintaining that behavior over the long term. So if you're wondering, okay, what does this actually look like? Because I've been in that cycle that you've mentioned where I commit and then I don't follow through consistently and then I just stop. And so if I'm being honest, I really don't like to make commitments anymore because I don't trust myself to follow through on them. If that's your thought process, I'm going to link to the next video that's going to walk you through what it looks like to build an environment that is supportive of sustained behavior through these critical phases when the behavior change is really fragile and really does require a lot of intentional effort in order to sustain it all the way through. So I'll link to that video, and in the meantime, I will give you one tip. One of the most important things, especially in this acquisition phase, is developing some sort of a regular practice where you're recognizing your progress and you're just keeping your finger on the pulse of where things may be starting to drift. And you want to do that on a weekly basis, because a week is truly, it's just long enough for that drift to start to happen, but it's short enough to catch it and course correct before things really compound into a whole new direction you didn't want to go. So if that is something that you're looking to establish, it's just a regular weekly practice where you're doing those things, I purposely send out a Friday recalibration every Friday afternoon, and it's designed for that exact purpose, to help you end the week sensing the progress that you made and making sure you're heading into the weekend without carrying the weight of whatever didn't get done that week, and with a really clear plan of, okay, what does next week look like if I have started to drift a little bit somewhere? What does it look like next week to really prioritize that? Not starting the week with a 90-item to-do list, but just having a realistic idea of what really needs my attention this next week and what can I keep coming back to so that I am making progress and I'm not drifting too far away from those long-term goals that I'm trying to work towards. So I'll link to that down below. That's called the Friday recalibration. And make sure that you click subscribe and turn on notifications if you want to get that next video on how to get through these two phases, the acquisition and the maintenance phase. Thanks so much for being here. I appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next one.